This program is brought to you by the City of Fountains Coaches Association.
Carlos Nelson with Cascade Sports, and today we've got Spring Hill College, the athletic director and the head basketball coach. Who do we have here?
My name is Craig Kennedy, and I am the men's basketball coach, and I'm the assistant athletic director here.
Hey, Coach, as you might know by looking at previous interviews, let's go back. Let's go way back.
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah. When you first fell in love with the sport, then we're going to talk about your career as it relates to Spring Hill,
Okay.
HBCU. But I want our audience to get to know who you are.
Sure.
And it's important to me for you to talk about and name names, if you
Okay.
can remember, who helped you build your skill set and helped you build your career to today.
Sure, sounds good. Well, I'm originally from Canada, and I grew up on a thoroughbred horse farm with about 30 head of horses. And as you can imagine, in the winter in Canada, it gets pretty cold. So
Which part of Canada?
Winnipeg, right?
Oh,
right,
boy.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about Winnipeg.
Okay.
Hockey.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So everybody loved hockey there. And as any good Canadian, I tried playing hockey. But, you know, back when I played, there was no indoor rinks. So by the time we got the ice all swept off to play, my feet were so cold I didn't want to play anymore. So, you know, we had phys ed programs in elementary school. You know, we played some basketball there. And then starting my 7th grade at what was called junior high school, I got a little smarter. And I found out it was warm in the gym, and it was a lot colder out on the farm doing chores. So I was able to finagle my dad into believing me that I had a career in basketball, and I tried out for the school team. Now, what you have to understand, and I think this is important for young coaches, in Canada, you don't get paid to coach in schools. It's all volunteer.
Didn't know that.
So from my 7th grade to my senior year, those 6 years, I had 5 different coaches. And it's literally whoever was interested, they coached. So you would have pockets of schools that had very good programs because you had somebody who loved it. And then you'd have other schools, it was just potpourri, you know. So I tried out for the basketball team. And we had a kid in our school, and he was 6 feet tall with a mustache in the 6th grade. So in the 7th grade, he's on the team with me. He's one of my buddies, and we're going through doing layups because that's what they did back then, right? Do layups. None of us really knew how to do layups. But hang on one second. We grab a door here.
You good?
So I'm going doing layups and stuff, and at some point the coach stops and says, "There's only one of you here who knows how to do layups. And it's that kid over there." Well, we all look at my buddy Phil because he's 6 feet tall with a mustache. We figure it's got to be him. And he's pointing to me. And I don't know why I knew how to do a layup, but I just did. So that really kind of started my career. And I had a phys ed teacher named Wayne Williams, who was just fantastic. He was really good at challenging middle school kids to be men and grow up. That was probably the best thing he did. And our school was a volleyball school. So basketball kind of taken a back seat to everything. So the next year, my brother ended up coaching my team. He was 5 years older than me. I played through middle school. I got through high school with another series of coaches, grew to love the game. Found out my dad's cousin's husband, who we called Uncle Carl. His name was Carl Ridd. Carl Ridd would have been the first Canadian to play in the NBA. He was drafted by St. Louis, but went into the ministry instead. And he held George Mikan to 8 points in a game once. So that kind of gives you an idea that Carl, and he was nicknamed King Carl, he was a pretty good basketball player.
I like that. Mikan had a game with him.
He did.
Well,
he did.
For our audience that don't know who he was.
Right, but they'll all know who the Mikan drill is, but they may not realize he was the first big man in the NBA.
Right.
So I went through high school playing poorly in a poor league I became a decent player in that league. In my senior year, there was no coach for the JV team. So my buddy and I coached the JV team and played on the varsity. And that's how I really got my start in coaching. Then Wayne Williams, who was my middle school phys ed teacher, he said, we got a really good bunch of kids. You should come and coach them. And I ended up coaching both the boys and the girls team. At the middle school, had some real success with them. I had three great phys ed teachers. Two of them I'm still in touch with today. A guy named Gordon Mooshie, who, if you can imagine Hawkeye Pierce on MASH, that was Moosh. And then Brian Hayes, a guy who had been Trapper John, and then a guy, Wayne Gluting, who Gluting played at ND State, I believe. And so those guys really got me going in basketball. I started to go to different camps at the University of Winnipeg, which had a pretty good program. And I just fell in love with the game, you know?
Yeah, coming from Canada, because hockey and some of the other sports, and really from an NBA standpoint and a college standpoint, basketball is relatively new, 20 years per se.
Sure.
To get the public interest, correct. I should say.
Correct.
Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So again, hockey is obviously a very big sport there. Now my dad was a teacher for 37 years, and he taught at a school called Tech Voc. It was a vocational school. And they ran at that time, which was one of the largest tournaments in North America. It was called the Winnipeg Invitational Tournament, the WIT. And they had teams from every province in Canada and some teams in the United States come up and compete in it. Then the University of Winnipeg, which, now think of this, it's a school, I think about 2,500 students back then, maybe 4,000.
And what year are we talking about so that our audience?
Early 80s. The University of Winnipeg had 4 teams, men's and women's volleyball, men's and women's basketball. And it became known as the University of the Final Four because it went to the Final Four in all those sports. Mm-hmm. Now, my senior year in high school, we won the provincial championship, which is like a state championship in volleyball. So volleyball was very big besides hockey. A lot of the guys that I got wanting to play hockey or wanting to play basketball were playing hockey. So we never got the best talent. So anyways, we're into the early 80s now. My dad's school is doing really well. I love the coaching. He gets me involved with a guy named Vic Pruden. Vic had been coaching the Canadian Junior National Program. Brilliant coach. He wrote one of the best books on coaching called A Conceptual Approach to Basketball. Fabulous coach. So I got to work with him a little bit and a guy named Joe DiCurzio. In fact, funny, I talked to Joe about 4 nights ago. He's still coaching. He's a little Italian guy. He talked out the side of his mouth like this. He was a goalkeeper in Italy, and his team was undefeated and unscored on. Team at Tech Voc. Now, I came from a small country school. Literally, there was no stop sign in our town. And when I wanted to get good at basketball, I nailed a rim on the side of our barn. So you couldn't dribble much because the chickens had pecked the ground up there, and you had to learn to do a layup by jumping straight up, because if you jump forward, you hit the barn. Now, I'm Irish and I'm not terribly bright, but after hitting that barn a few times, I thought, man, I better jump higher, So you learn to lower your hips and jump up. So I went to some camps and stuff. I found out I wasn't very good at playing this game. I was good in a small area, but not good in the city. And so I got into the coaching end of it. And Vic Pruden took me under his wing, and I learned a lot from him. I then went to the University of Winnipeg as a student. And growing up, I probably had learning disabilities that weren't diagnosed back then.
Right.
They kind of said, Kennedy, you go sit on that side of the room. And I remember going across and looking on the other side and going, hey, why are all the smart kids over there and I'm over here with these guys? Found out that I was probably very ADHD and stuff like that. So,
I think I have that also.
Do you? Okay. So we have the same barber too, by the way, but I'm keeping my hat on. So so I eventually enrolled at university, and I was coaching a high school girls JV team, and I ended up coaching a senior women's team. And I was doing the play-by-play and color commentary at the University of Winnipeg.
Oh, that's excellent.
So that's how I got to know the coaches there. And I kind of ended up doing the Pat Riley. I moved from the broadcast booth onto the sidelines. Now, they had a very successful program under a guy named Tom Kendall. He was an Englishman and had a very, very successful program. But we reached a point with the women's team that we kind of were factionalized. And we just made a decision that we felt we could teach well enough, but you couldn't get kids to change their attitude. They either had a great attitude and a work ethic or they didn't. So we decided to bring in better athletes with work ethic and attitude, change the program around.
Talk about building a culture, because then I will get into how you built the culture at Spring Hill.
Sure. And it's a great question because, as I say, the University of Winnipeg under Tom Kendall had a very successful women's basketball program, but they couldn't win a national championship. Now, again, we're a school about 2,500 to 4,000 students. Our crosstown rival was the University of Manitoba that had 25,000 students. So much bigger school. And in our conference, we also had the University of Regina, which was a top 10 school in the country.
Haven't heard that name in a long.
Yeah.
I'm originally from New York.
Okay.
And haven't learned, man, that's like 30 years ago. I haven't heard that school's name mentioned.
Yeah. And then we also had on the men's side, Brandon University under Jerry Hemmings, who had been at North Carolina. He was a North Carolina guy, very strong in the men's program, but not in the women's. So in one small conference, you had some of the best teams in the country. So again, we had a good team, but we just felt we had to have better athletes, but we had to have attitude and work ethic. So we literally cut half the players on the team and brought in 8 new players. And from there, we started to go. The upshot of it is we finished second at the national tournament one year. And we said that head coach and I were flying back from New Brunswick or Prince Edward Island. And he's a sports psychology guy. And his wife played on the national team at Canada. She's a sports psychology major as well. That's important. We'll come back to that. We're flying home, and he and I look at each other and say, listen, we need to take a break. This has been a long season. We closed our eyes for an hour. We woke up, looked at each other, and went, that was long enough. We went on, coach. In 3 years, we won 101 games and had 2 losses. We tied UCLA's record of 88 consecutive wins and won 3 national championships in a row. During that time, I took 1 year. I was the interim head coach at Trinity Western University in British Columbia. And that team was basically a junior college team, but played in the college setting. And we finished number 13 in the country, set a lot of school records there. And I did that for 1 year and then came back to Winnipeg. And we win our 3 national championships in a row. I think we had 5 players that went on to play professionally. 2 of them I'm still in touch with today. I'm actually recruiting their children. And then the head coach took a D2 job at California, Pennsylvania. So I got the women's team as the interim for a year. Now, we had graduated 90% of our offense from the year before. And in our conference, we had the number 2 and the number 4 team in the country. So I'm coming in with kids that are just raw, have hardly played. My point guard played a minute in the national championship the year before. And our best player she was in education. And the way it does, you have 5 years of eligibility in Canada, which is a very good system. She was in her 5th year, but she did it at our crosstown rival, the University of Manitoba. So she would have to commute back and forth. So we missed her probably for over a third of the practices. Anyways, we were very young. We were very raw. By the end of the year, we beat the University of Regina at their place 2 out of 3. They were number 4 team in the country. Lost in the 3rd game to the University of Manitoba. They went on to win the national championship. So very, very competitive. There I was at the interim head coach, and I'm out after a year. Now, during this time, 7 years at the University of Winnipeg as a volunteer assistant, I got paid the princely sum of $750 once. So I hear a lot of kids say, well, I wouldn't coach, young coaches, I wouldn't coach if I didn't get paid. Listen, I paid my own way to drive in 30 miles every day. I paid my own meals. sacrifice to get where you want to go.
Right. Well, that's semi what my media company has been able to do. I listen to people all the time for the love of the game, for the love of this and that. And I'm more like, if they weren't really paying you, let's see how long you would be doing that.
There's no doubt.
Yeah, and you hear all these cliches, but we're living in a whole different society now.
There's no
a lot
doubt.
I call it plasticity.
Oh, wow.
People are plastic and politically correct and all of that. But what the real deal is, and what you just described, is the real deal. When you're going up against the barn, where you're playing on dirt. Right. You don't have the air conditioning.
No.
You have the gym, and you really playing it for the love of the game.
Correct.
And they use that so flippantly, just like everybody's a hero. Right. If you cut somebody's fingernails, oh, he's a hero.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So let's talk about your transition to the States.
Okay, good. So after I was the interim coach at the University of Winnipeg, they decided this is a women's program, we should hire a women's coach. So I was out. Now, I applied all over the country for jobs. And I used to get the NCAA news mailed to me up in Canada. Well, by the time I got it, jobs have been gone out, and I'm getting letters typed up, faxing them and mailing them to coaches.
The job is already gone.
Hundreds of jobs I applied for. I had 3 coaches return my phone call. One of them was a guy named Joe Champy at Auburn University. He returns my phone call. And he says, yeah, I remember your resume, because we don't get many people from Canada. So we got talking a little bit. He says, I've just hired a male assistant. I can't hire another one. But the prep school in town is looking for a coach. Would you be interested? I said, sure, that'd be great. So he connects me with them. I talk to them and they say, oh, sorry, we've just hired somebody. Okay. So I'm back in Canada. Whatever jobs I can work, I'm a student teacher, substitute teacher, whatever I can do, because I've got my wife and a young daughter and son. So about 3 weeks later, I get a phone call from this school in Auburn, Lee Scott Academy. Are you still looking for a job? Yes. Our coach just quit. Can we bring you down for an interview? Sure. So my wife and I, ex-wife now, we fly down to interview at Lee Scott Academy, Auburn, Alabama. They're the most wonderful people in the world. They're just fabulous people. But when I got there, girls weren't allowed to go in the weight room at that time. And we're talking 1996. So the girls program had not developed the way it eventually did. The guys program was very good, had a very good program. They were in an old school, moving into a new school. This is great. While we are down there, my ex-wife's grandfather who raised her dies. So we literally overnight have to decide, are we going to move 1,800 miles away from home where we don't know anybody or not? We say, what the heck, we'll go for it. Okay, go back to Canada. Now we start the immigration process. And we do it ourselves without a lawyer. So things start moving along pretty good. We're working with an office in Virginia. Next thing they know, they move the office to Texas. All new people who are not familiar with our case. And it's like pulling teeth. Finally, we get our papers approved. We can move to the United States on a teaching visa. Great. So my ex-wife and kids are going to fly down. My dad and I are going to drive down from Canada. We get to the border. The guy at the border says, what are you coming down to do? Coming down to coach. What kind of offense do you run? I tell him. What kind of defense? Do you have a clean air sticker on your vehicle? I said, I don't know. He says, boy, you can't come into the United States without a clean air sticker. And I'm like, oh my gosh, where do we find the clean air sticker? So we go under the hood, flashlight, we find it. Okay. He says, here, I'm giving you 1 year. And I said, but my immigration from United States, I get 3 years. He said, son, I'm giving you 1 year. If you don't like it, you can take your butt back where you came from. I said, sir, thank you very much. I'll take 1 year. So we came down to the States, got started there, had to go back and appeal to get our 3 years. So the boys team I had was very, very good. We went to 2 Final Fours in a row and lost to Tuscaloosa Academy, who had a guy named Pete Chilcutt who went to North Carolina and then went to the NBA. So they had a very, very good program. The women's team, it took quite a while to develop them to where we needed to go. But this whole time, Joe Champy at Auburn is inviting me to practices. He's inviting me to meetings. I'm talking basketball with him the whole time. So I did 4 years, and I get to work his camp. I'm working the men's camp. I'm working their camp. And I have a guard that was pretty good who really liked basketball, Lee Scott. And I get him into 5-star camp. And I'm at 5-star. I think we're in Hampton, Sydney. And again, I've grown up hearing of Joe Champy. I knew who this Joe Champy guy was. I've heard of this guy, Howard Garfinkel. I've heard of 5-star. I get to meet Howard Garfinkel. We get talking, and I said, Mr. Garfinkel, I would love to work your camp. Is there anything, what do I need to do? And he's smoking all the time. He smokes and says, I need a great shooting coach. I said, Mr. Garfinkel, I don't know if I'm great, but I'm effective. He goes, effective is better than great. You're hired. And I got to work 5-star camp. Oh my gosh. What an honor to work that camp, to be around those kind of coaches. It was basketball from morning to night. Dennis Frisco, Herb Welling, Tom McCrory, people like that, Tom Konchelski, Sarge Sears. Boom.
The players that you coach.
And the players that we coached. That probably the best that I got to work with when I was there was Zach Randolph. Pretty good players. So, I was loving this. Lee Klein, Will Klein, the Kleins were phenomenal. Tobin Anderson, just a great experience being around. Gannon Baker was there, around guys like this, just absorbing the game because I just loved the game so much. And I grew up with a very, rural work ethic of working hard and just trying to do your best. And I wasn't a very good athlete and I wasn't the brightest guy, that's for sure. But I remember I was refereeing a game, and I'd refereed when I was in Canada, so I knew a little bit. And I'm refereeing a game, and I'm running up and down just because you're supposed to work hard. After the game, this red-headed coach stops me. And he said, my son was playing in that game you reffed. And I think, oh my gosh, what have I done wrong? He said, I'm going to tell you something. He said, if you'll work as hard at coaching as you do at reffing, you got a chance to make it. His name was Pete Gillen. And all the while I was coaching back in Canada in high school, I was going down to Minneapolis to these Kellogg's clinics and getting to meet coaches and stuff like this. I think I've always been kind of a student of the game. While I was at 5-star, I get a call from Joe Champy, and I get hired as the director of ops for Auburn women's basketball. Such an honor. Such an honor. So I literally leave 5-star, go right to Auburn to work basketball camps. And it was great. But while we were there, I get a phone call from the guys at 5-star, and they say, listen, we're doing a book on girls basketball. Would you be interested in getting your head coach to contribute? I said, I would be honored. They said, will you put in some drills too? I said, sure. So I put in 5 of my drills. Coach Champy, he doesn't understand at first. He thinks it's part of Make-A-Wish Foundation, but it was put out by Wish Publishing. Mm-hmm. And he said, the money never goes to the kids. I said, no, coach, this is Wish Publishing, not Make-A-Wish Foundation. Okay. So now again, for young coaches, I'm faxing all my drills and stuff back to Wish Publishing. Fax all of Coach Champy's. We fax everything back. One day the book shows up in my office. I'm so proud. I look through it. My drills are published in a book. Coach Champy's on the back cover. But only one of his drills is in the book. And 5 of mine. He's not a happy camper. He's not a happy camper. So I'm going, okay, because I'm very new on the job now. I'm going, what am I going to do? So I kind of put the book on the side. And next day, Coach Champy comes in. Coach Champy was really, really good about spending time with family, especially at the breakfast. So I used to come in early in the morning. And he would catch me in there and say, have you had breakfast with your children? And I said, no, coach. He said, you're not to come in the office till you have breakfast with the kids. So typically I'd come in at 5 a.m, work till 7, go home, have breakfast with the kids, and then come back to the office. So anyways, Coach Champy comes in, and he's always so professional. It's so great. He says, Coach Kennedy? Yes, Coach. He says, I've got a bit of an issue. I said, okay, Coach, what's that? He goes, well, I got this book. He said, have you seen it? I said, yeah, I kind of browsed through it, but I haven't looked at it in depth. He says, well, I'm not very happy about it. I said, why is that? He goes, well, I got 1 drill in there and you have 5. He says, not only that, 2 of my other drills are in there. Some other coaches named them theirs and they're mine. So I'm thinking, how am I going to deal with this? I'm new with this guy. You know, he's a revered coach. I'll try humor. I said, well, Coach Champion, I'm not very happy either. He goes, well, why not? I said, well, I got 5 drills in there and I'm not mentioned anywhere. You got 1 and you're on the cover. So we kind of diffused. But the next week, some coach phoned and they wanted some drills. And we're having our staff meeting. And he goes, oh, ask Coach Kennedy. He's got lots of drills. But, you know, I got to work in that environment under such a professional coach. And it's really funny how God does things, because I'd always dreamed of having an office overlooking the gym. When I first moved to Auburn, their offices were on the ground floor. They did a renovation and the offices moved to the 5th floor. And I always remember one night I was in there, the kids had gone to bed, I went back to work, and I'm sitting there looking out over the floor out of my office, and I think, I am so blessed. And I light up a cigar to celebrate. And all of a sudden I look up and I go, oh crap, there's 5 fire extinguishers in my office. You know, yeah, I got to put this out really fast. But it was a great experience. I got to meet, Cliff Ellis, and got to know him really well on the men's side. That's when Auburn had a great run with Porter and Pullman and Doc and Mamadou and all those guys, and Shannon Weaver on the men's side. So I got to work the men's and the women's camps. I moved from a director of operations. I actually took a pay cut from Lee Scott Academy to be director of ops at Auburn. Became promoted to an assistant coach the next 3 years. I really understood being thankful to be loyal. And coaches nowadays don't understand. We didn't have synergy or stuff like that. We went on the road.
Is somewhat a lost commodity in today's society. And I think loyalty, you can wrap that up with work ethic and some of the other things that have produced some great coaches, some great individuals in the sports arena.
Right. Yeah, there's no doubt. You know, we used to travel. I would go recruiting, and I would have to take 2 VCRs with me and a box of VHS tapes. And I'd be working on scouting reports on the road, going back and forth, dubbing tapes. And you had to make sure you got it right, that you weren't. And my dyslexia would kick in, and I would sometimes press the wrong buttons. And then I would have to fax the scouting reports back to Coach Champy. And you know how faxes were in those days. They were so fickle. You'd have to be standing at the hotel desk waiting to make sure these things got faxed so he got the scouting reports. And you think nowadays, and I tell our assistant coaches here how easy they have it just with synergy. You just go online. And, you know, we went from the point of VHS tapes to CDs and DVDs. We thought that was a big deal. We had an 8-stack DVD burner so we could burn DVDs. And that was a big deal. I remember when we got our first video editing program, and the recruiting coach, she wanted a highlight tape done of a recruit, because back then you could do highlight tapes of recruits. So we had no manual for this. And, you know, the World Wide Web was very new back then. You couldn't Google stuff and find out. It took me 24 hours to make a 2.5-minute highlight tape for this kid.
Yeah, well, in my industry, parents be asking me about making a highlight tape for their kid. And I'm like, do you know how much that would cost? A real highlight tape? That means you'd have to be at most of those games.
Correct.
And I'm saying even that with modern technology.
Sure.
That's real time consuming. Let's move forward to now what's going on at Spring Hill.
Okay, so let me go. At Auburn, we ended up winning the WNIT championship, beat Baylor at Baylor. The next year, we go to the NCAA tournament. We beat North Carolina State by 25. We've got 3 of the posts that I was fortunate to work with went to the WNBA, and we're playing Connecticut at Connecticut. Gino Auriemma's 500th win, and they got a kid named Diana Taurasi. We're down 6 at halftime, not playing very well. I said, Coach, we can make a run at these guys. He says, I think we're right because we're not playing very well. We never scored a field goal till 4 minutes left in the game. Taurasi just took that to another level. And that's where I really learned about, the drive and tenacity of a kid at that level. After that game, Coach Champy retires, and I go to Georgia Southern. I came down to Georgia Southern to Stephen F. Austin, and my daughter was a softball player, and we felt we could still stay in the same area with the team. So I went to Georgia Southern for 2 years, was fortunate to recruit the first player ever to make all-rookie team, and then recruited the first player that ever became Rookie of the Year at Georgia Southern. I was there 2 years. We beat South Carolina at South Carolina, almost beat Georgia at Georgia.
Gamecocks.
Correct. And we were up on Alabama with 30 seconds left at Alabama, and the freshman point guard turned it over. We really ramped the team up to a different level. I then went to Troy with my buddy Mike Murphy. Murph had been on women's side and men's side at Alabama, and that's how he and I became friends. He gets the Troy job. I came there with him at Troy. I spent 6 years at Troy. We end up getting fired after 1 bad year. Now my son is a junior in high school, and I tell people, he's just like me, except 2 of me. He was 6'4", 325 pounds, and a promising football player. I had a choice of moving away from him, moving him, or giving up coaching. So I ended up giving up college coaching and coached for 2 years at the prep school in town while he finished up at high school. He ended up going on to UAB to coach or to play football. And so I coached at the prep school for 2 years. And then for 8 months, I was out of a job. And it looked like I was going to go with a buddy of mine to work in academic affairs at another institution. And while I was at Auburn, this is what people don't understand. While I was at Auburn, I also taught courses. And while I was at Troy, I taught courses. So for 8 months, I didn't have a job. And I ended up building a little cowboy church in Troy and helped a friend of mine out with some woodworking and stuff. And then I got called to come here to Spring Hill College to work in the compliance office. And so I came to Spring Hill for 3 years doing compliance while they transitioned from NAIA to Division II. During that time, I also became this.
Did they ever come here to Kansas City to the NAIA tournament?
If they did, it would have been years and years before. So I had ended up as the interim assistant women's soccer coach for a year. And then I ended up taking over the JV men's basketball program here mid-season. And it was very, very hard to be an administrator and sit in front of a desk and hear those balls bouncing out there and not do anything. And got to know the kids. A lot of the kids worked for me in student employment and stuff like that. And got to know the guys, really good bunch of guys. And then the head coach here, he took another job. And so the athletic director, Jim Hall, he said, listen, he said, I want you to take over the men's team. And I hadn't coached guys in quite a couple of years. I coached the boys. I'd actually coached boys and girls and volleyball when I was at the private school in Troy. So I ended up coming here as the guys coach. And it was developing culture because this school has not had a winning program in a long time.
I never even heard of Spring Hill.
Yeah. Well, it was founded in 1830. It's a Jesuit college, the longest continually used baseball stadium in America. Hank Aaron, who, by the way, today got his first home run in history in April 23rd. Hank Aaron, Babe Ruth, Satchel Paige have all been on this field. And it's known Dr. Martin Luther King, in his letters from Birmingham jail, writes about the support he received from the students and the faculty and staff at Spring Hill College. And there are wells all over the campus, and allegedly there are connections to tunnels for the Underground Railroad through the campus. So it's had a long history of social justice. And they actually say that baseball in Cuba was started by priests going over there.
I'm like, how did Spring Hill become an HBCU?
Well, that's a great question, because, and it has to do with our support of social causes.
Right. All right. Because when I'm like, Spring Hill, where did that come from? But and that's why I do these long interviews. So talk about your tenure there and what your record was, where from the time you started to where you're at right now.
Sure. So I've just finished my second year with these guys. And again, when I took over in July of 2018, here's what happened. The point guard that I inherited scored 3 baskets his junior year, all year. The forward I inherited as a senior played 4 games the year before. And the post that I inherited had a chance to go to the NBA players camp and wasn't interested in going. So one of our underclassmen went to the NBA camp, had the best experience of his life. 2 weeks later, he tears his ACL. So I get these group of guys, the recruits. I recruited one kid out of Chicago to come in.
How many scholarships have you been able to work with?
We are able to work with, you're allowed 9 under the NCAA, and we can work that. We have to carry a full JV roster.
But how many do you actually have?
Well, it's stacked on top of academics.
All right.
And so you have to understand it costs $54,000 a year to go here.
Woo!
20 ACT minimum, 10, 20 SAT for us. So it's a different kind of kid we're recruiting.
Right. There's no doubt. But I always ask the coaches, like I just did Lincoln University's head coach for football. Most of the colleges in their division, they get 30 scholarships. He only has 16 to work with. Right. And I went to Virginia State as a freshman.
Okay.
And I know they work financial aid. They work all different types of things to try to athletes. That's why I was just like, what are you working with versus what your competitors are working with?
So we stack on top of academic awards. So obviously the better test score GPA, they have the money that they're getting. So I take over these guys. I get to recruit one player, kid out of Chicago. And I call the guys during the summer. One of the things, I'm very honest with the players, and I'm very honest with the recruits. Anything I say to them, I say right to somebody's face. So when I got hired, I phoned the guys, and they did not want me as their coach. Because when I coached the JV team, I platooned, because the JV guys aren't on scholarship except academic awards. So we just let everybody play. They get it pretty much equal minutes. Correct. So now the varsity squad, they're concerned I'm going to platoon. And I'm thinking in my mind, the kid who had scored 3 baskets his junior year, the only way you're going to get on the court is if I platoon.
Right.
So for me now, coming in, knowing the guys really didn't want me as their coach, it really took not a long time, but it took time to build rapport with the guys. And so one of the things I was very honest with them. Like I used to say to them in our first meeting, guys, when I was young, I used to have a full head of hair, and now I don't. Those are facts. So when I say something to you, I'm telling you a fact. This is my perception. I said, now, I think I still have a full head of hair until I look in the mirror, and then I go, oh my gosh. So our perception of ourselves is often very different than how other people see us. So this is the basis I went from. And the other thing is this. My son ended up going to UAB to play football. That's the year they cut the football program. He transferred to another school and had a terrible experience. He was treated so poorly. He drove himself to hospital at 2 a.m. with an appendicitis attack. Coaches never came to see him. The trainers never came to see him. At the end of the year, they brought him back in and they said, Kennedy, You were a very good high school player, but you're not any good anymore. We're going to keep you here because of your GPA, but you'll never play. So my son still wanted to play football at that point. He ended up transferring back to Troy. And he comes to Troy. They win a bowl game. He's about to start at center on a team that just won a bowl game. He's in the weight room lifting. One of the coaches goes, Kennedy, what's your problem? We got wide receivers who lift more than you. He said, well, I'm really lifting with one arm. They said, what do you mean you're lifting with one arm? He says, I have no feeling in my left arm. So they run a bunch of tests and stuff. The upshot of it is he had spinal stenosis and nerve damage. The doctor said, if you get hit straight on, you'll probably be paralyzed from the chest down. So he quit. So where I'm going with this, my basis of how I treat the guys on our team, a lot of it is how I want my children to be treated, the golden rule. And I said to these guys, I will treat you like I wanted my children to be treated. There's days we're going to like each other. There's days we're going to love each other. There's days we're not going to like each other. But the next day is a new day and we start over. So I had this group of guys. Our best player tears his ACL. He's out for the year. I have a hodgepodge group of guys I don't know because I hadn't recruited them all. We get going. Now, prior to my taking over, this team got pressed like crazy, couldn't get the ball over center, and they were losing by 20 or more points all the time in conference. I put in a different press structure. We did a few things. The upshot of it is we cut our losses down in half. We actually got on ESPN 3 and beat Central State here in our gym on ESPN 3.
Central State University in Wilberforce?
Correct.
That's my alma mater. I don't like you at all.
Oh, my God. That's okay. They got us this year pretty good. But on the ESPN game, we won.
All right.
And just a super bunch of kids. Now, our best player was a freshman in the fall, becomes academically ineligible second half of the year. So he's out. And so we just, we played 3 D1 teams. We get working, boom, 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 boom. We have a kid, and this is, dealing with parents. The kid who was academically ineligible, his dad thought I needed to nurture him a little bit more. And, there had been a situation, and I said to the dad, I said, listen, if I had ever lied to my dad, he would have nurtured me with a size 12 in my backside. So that kid works really hard. He gets himself back eligible. We had another kid that was very good, a freshman. He's not happy with his playing time. He's averaging 14 points a game. He ended up transferring elsewhere, coming off the bench, averaging 8 points a game. So this gets my first chance to recruit. I put together what's arguably the toughest D2 schedule in the country. 4 top 25 D2 teams, 5 of the top 25 defensive teams, 1 top 10 NAIA team, 3 D1 teams. That's our schedule. We got a 6'8", 275 kid who's committed to us. I got the kid coming back off ACL. I got the power forward that I recruited. He's back. And I got this guard back who had been our leading scorer as a freshman. All of a sudden, Murphy's Law comes into play. The big kid at the last minute gets a D1 offer, takes that. The power forward gets late season wrist surgery. He's out for the year. The freshman guard who's coming back, for whatever reason, it just didn't work out for him. So we're playing number 1 team in the country, Bellarmine, who lost to Louisville by 10. We're playing all these good teams, and it was kind of finding our way through stuff. Well, the upshot of it is we end up beating 3 teams on the road we've never beaten before. We cut our losses down. We're double digits now. We're losing by 4. We're losing by 6. We're losing at the buzzer. We lost to Miles College by 9 at their place without 2 of our best players.
Do you know their coach?
Yes. Tough.
I'm trying to get in touch with them right now.
Okay, well, I'll get in touch with them.
Text me because some of these schools, this virus, they're really on break. They don't even come in or don't answer the phones.
Right.
And that's why I ask all the time for my coaches' cell numbers and their personal information, because this is not going to be a one-stop thing with Cascade Sports.
Beautiful.
We plan to really now do all the HBCUs And we do exposure camp. We're basically a high school website.
Okay.
And if you go past these HBCU videos,
yes,
you'll see games and interviews with the players, because I go to the practices and I interview like 7, 8 players,
right.
and you can see the games, and I let them talk just like I'm letting you talk.
Right.
You get a chance to know who they are, because different schools, especially HBCUs, you don't have the budget to come way out to Kansas City or this and that. But you might can get a diamond in the rough out of St. Louis or out of Kansas City, looking at the network. And then we do that exposure camp where we have 30, 40 kids. You might want to fly in or send an assistant in to take a look at, and participate in the drills and what have you. They all-day camps.
Right.
And the thing that we do is free.
Beautiful.
See, because most of the things we do are free, because we're an African-American network. Our community really doesn't have the money. They have the money. I've had people say, well, you can charge the kids at least $50.
Right.
I'm not trying to charge the kids nothing.
Right.
I'm trying to provide a place where they can get some scholarships.
Sure.
It's just too many of us that are in this sport
for the money.
See, with the mercenary, not just money. They be mercenary. I'm not going to do anything unless I can benefit. Right.
No, you're very right. And that we're dealing with that in recruiting, So this last year was obviously a tough start with the schedule we had. My first year here, we went from the lowest scoring team in the conference to the number 1 scoring team in the conference, 80 points a game, and tied for number 1 in free throw percentage. This year we're back a little bit lower, but we've averaged 78 points a game the last 2 years. Our problem is we're not athletic enough to defend on the perimeter. And that's an area that we're going to have to address, which we are addressing in our recruiting. Nicest bunch of guys. We had our first Box Toro HBCU All-American this year. Chase Shellman averaged a double-double. He went from averaging 7 points a game his freshman, sophomore, and junior year to averaging 20 and 10 this year. And we had our first ever Google Cloud Academic All-American in the Southern region. So, we're really, really proud of these guys. We have over a 3.0 GPA. I raised people like my phys ed teacher, Coach Williams, did to be men. And I tell them, listen, I have my 2 degrees. You have to earn yours. So everything we do with these guys is about accountability and honesty. And we're talking about building a culture, Yeah,
well, HBCUs, I go into this with the coaches because I went to one. Most HBCUs, and I would think all, have a nurturing effect.
Yes.
That the gentleman you talked about, he went to D1. So you can go to those schools, you'll be on the bench.
Correct. And this guy ended up actually going to a D2.
You want to go where you can play.
Yes.
Where you're not on the bench, where you can have a good experience.
Yes. Yes. Very much so. And it doesn't matter what you do, it's not going to be for everybody. So as a coach, you have to set a standard. We had a young man who actually had played on the JV team, was on the varsity team my first year, and his mom came in and started talking about the NBA. And I said, ma'am, your son's not going to the NBA. Well, with his height, I said, ma'am, your son was on the JV team last year. He is not going to go to the NBA. You need to realistically assess things. So the dream, and here's the problem, and this I've been talking with coaches a lot about this. There's about 650 D1 and D2 schools. There's over 900 guys in the transfer portal. That's 1.5 guys per school. So for a freshman coming out of high school, and here are the statistics, 3.4% of high school students will go to college and play basketball. 1% at Division I, 1% at Division II, 1.4% at Division III. So you're coming out of high school, and now you're competing against 900 guys who have experience. It's not good enough to just be the hardest worker and a great attitude at 6'2" combo guard.
This is the deal, and by me coming off of a high school national type team.
Yes.
When you go to school, because you was the big fish in your pond,
Right.
when you go to school, you got guys coming that they were the man at their school. They were the man at their state, in their state. And a lot of guys wilt under that because they're so used to being the man. When they come up against some real competition,
Correct.
They can't handle it.
Right. Or they can score when the game's already done.
Right.
You know?
So really being honest with your players. But see, man, you have a hell of a track record on coaching, on different aspects of sports in general.
True.
Compliance, and all the different.
I taught sport management. I was a certified coaching instructor in Canada. They have a national certification program, which is pretty good. I was a certified instructor up there. I've coached different sports. But one of the things with our guys, and I really believe this in my heart because we did it with our team up in Canada, the team has to be invested in our success. So when I put an offense in practice, we'll run it and I'll say to the guys, thumbs up or thumbs down. Do you like it? Yes or no? If the guys don't like it, I'm not going to run it. Our timeouts are very discussional. Guys, what do you want to run here? Do you want to go man or zone? Do you want to trap, not trap? What do you want to do offensively? Because they're the team on the floor.
You're trying to work with the talent that you have and the mindset that you have.
Correct. And they have to
go ahead and try to rough ride them. That don't work.
It doesn't work. And they have to be invested in it. And our guys know here, they're coming here to get a degree. Now, where we have to change our culture is we have to get guys who want to be in the gym more and become better basketball players too.
And get their degree. Well, hold it. And I totally understand that. So in wrapping up, Coach,
yes,
what would your final words be that you would have to say to players, to coaches, and to your fans?
Sure. Well, number one, the SIAC has been phenomenal for us. It has been just an absolutely great experience. The coaches and the kids have been the nicest kids you can ever meet. They really are. It's been a great experience for us being involved in them in the conference. So that has just been tremendous. We've really enjoyed that. For coaches, you have to understand, you have to be passionate about this and you have to work hard. And for kids, student athletes, it's the same thing. Kid will say, this is the hardest I've worked. But you have to compare yourself, as you said, against other kids. Are you working as hard as you can against other players? Because you're going to have to push yourself. You have to take care of the academics, and you have to take care of your academics early. And you have to be a little bit selfish about your own success. And another word for selfish is discipline. You have to be willing to discipline yourself from all these other outside things. So, no, this is what I need to do to succeed. And then at some point, the rubber is going to meet the road, and you have to say, this was a great experience, but now I need to move on.
All right. As we say at Cascade Sports and on our other programs, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Yes,
very much so. And we're a big believer in community service and reaching out to help others. And we got just a great group of guys here. I'm so blessed to be able to work with them because they really are great guys.
Pleasure having you on the show, Coach.
Thank you so much. Look forward to talking with you again.
This is brought to you by the Location 1 Building, 1734 East 63rd Street. When you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself.